All right, everyone. Hey, this is Retro DM Ray again. Sorry for that right there. I'm trying to get Zoom to actually work properly, and hopefully it will work properly here in just a moment if I can get it to do that right there. Okay. All right, so last time we covered all the way up to this particular chart right here, and I ended off with talking about this cool name chart that you could randomly generate or look and roll or look and choose for yourself. Um, but then we're going to move on from here as part two of my Shadowdark RPG coverage. If you like this content, give me a thumbs up, give me a like, a subscribe, and please share with all that you know in the YouTube and your gaming world. I would really, really appreciate that. I've got a bunch of new subscribers recently, and that's just really awesome. I appreciate that. And also, I want to let you know I'm not covering this to be a shill. I'm not covering this for profit in any way. Um, I've not been paid to do it. I'm doing it just because I happen to really like the system. No, I'm not being a hypocrite, as in I don't care for any 5e stuff. I'm covering this because I think this is a good go-between, a mediocre, or I'd say not mediocre, a medium point between 5th edition and OSR. Because my motive here is to have 5th edition players take a look at what the OSR is really about, what old school gaming is really about, I should say, because even OSR is twisted as a word today to mean a bunch of different things, and I don't want to do that. I want to invite people into to playing Shadowdark RPG and other old school feeling or looking games like this, Forbidden Lands and Dragonbane. I'm going to cover again. Both of those will be coming up. More of those after a while. So that's my reason for doing this. I happen to like it. I cover things on my channel that I happen to like. If I don't like it and I can't support it with that approach, then I just won't cover the thing. So I just wanted to share that with you today before we get started, because there were some few folks that were asking kinds of questions about that, or making comments that are directed generally in that direction, and I just want to clear the air about that. All right, so let's move on from here. So you come up to your next section here in Shadowdark RPG, which I also really like, although I will admit, coming from the newer school and coming from very incredibly detailed or delineated versions of level advancement systems, this might be a challenge for you game masters, dungeon masters, which is this is talking about experience points. I like how she says experience points represents your learning, influence, and increasing skill, but they're based on the quality of the treasure and the boons that you receive during a session. We'll get to those after a while. And then that you can give it right away, or you can give it at the end of session. And then to gain a level, and here's the thing that might be a little difficult to kind of wrap yourself around or change about what you do as far as giving XP and leveling up, which is it's your current level times 10 in experience points. You can see the chart on the upper right hand side. You have level 1, which gives you your additional, your starting talent. Then you level up at 10 experience points and go to level 2. Then from level 2 to go to level 3, you're going to spend 20 XP and so on down the chart. And it also only goes to level 10. I'm not used to, except for in White Box Fantastic Medieval Adventure Game, I'm not used to any games that really have such a small level cap window. And in addition to that, I'm not used to games that give such a very, very small amount of experience points. Or if I am, then those games have a very, I would say, semi-delineated list of questions you might ask yourself, or you might ask your players at the table to determine what the XP is that you give them. This system is not like that. This system is the treasure has a category, and the category that that treasure falls into is what constitutes the giving of XP. And you might give a point of throughout the evening to one player, and maybe at the end of that session for some really creative or cool thing that they did at the table, and you might give one to each one of the players if they all had one of those ideas, and then that might conclude your session. Because there's no experience points for monsters, and there are no experience points for any other things. So it's an interesting thing to wrap your mind around, coming from a much higher XP award scale than this one is. Okay, so I just want to let you know that. Also, you get a talent roll at every odd level here, as you can see. So if you were to extend this out, it wouldn't be that difficult to extend it to level 20, even level 30 if you really wanted to go that high. But you will have to adjust monsters in relation to that, because the PCs will get very powerful very quickly. It will also remove or eliminate some of the talent roll sections on the table that you'll either have to choose a different talent or roll again, because level stats or attributes are capped at 18. And a lot of the talent roll tables give you bonuses to stats if you roll that or pick that particular talent. And that would have to be something that you would just run out of if you extended beyond level 10 here. Okay. And then increasing your hit points every time you move up a level. Of course, like in other games, you would roll your hit die and add it to your maximum hit points. But notice there's no mention of Constitution modifier here, and that's because Shadowdark RPG, as I said in the last video, you only add your Constitution attribute modifier at the beginning of your character. If you're a level 1 character, you'll add that to your initial hit point generation. If you're level 0, you won't use that at all. Your hit points are your Constitution's attribute modifier. Okay. All right, now we have some random characters here. You can use these tables, which I think are just really cool for random, either character generation, 0 or first level, as it says here. Also, random NPC generation. I think this is a really quick, down and dirty, kind of on the fly generation table here. I really like that. So you're going to roll your stats and the background and the class talents as normal. Then you're going to roll on here what their ancestry or race is, the class, if they're a priest, what priest spells, the deity in the given world setting that you're using, and then the language or languages that they might have. Again, this continues on to the next page. These are the common languages here. The first language list was the rare languages. Then you'll have alignment. If they're a wizard, they would have wizard spells. And then you can either get a crawling kit for gear, a weapon, and leather armor, and 5 gold pieces. Or you can randomly generate the gear. And of course, if you're 0 level, you'll have 1d4 of the following items, which you would randomly generate. And I like that because you could quickly go and get hirelings, men-at-arms, those types of things. In a local village, an outpost, a town, a fort, or whatever case may be, and you could quickly generate them really fast, throw it down on an index card, and then give it to the players. And by the way, Kelsey mentions herself, the designer of the game, that her influences are strongly in the direction of index card RPG as well as old school stuff. So that makes perfect sense that these things would be really fast, quick and dirty to generate, throw it in front of your players, and that would be the group that they hire or whatever. Okay, really cool old school picture here. I like this piece of artwork. I especially like all of the components that are hanging around the bag there. I think you miss a lot in the game if you take out those things for the wizard, because wizards are fragile. And although this game does have roll to cast, and as long as you don't fail or whatever, or have a bad mishap that causes it, you can continue to cast your spells over and over. But components are always necessary. There is no spell focus, those types of things. And I really like that mechanic, because you can get really creative in your explanations of what your wizard might smell like when you're walking around him, and look like, and all those kinds of things for purposes of components. What are things that you're going to spend treasure on picking up as a wizard, to do research, to do spell creation, and to cast the spells that you have. I just think that's really neat. That's just my opinion in the way that my group plays. Okay, now we get into the magic section. It says, what you call wizardry, I call faith. But in either case, our dedication that fuels it. It's our dedication that fuels it. Iraga, half-orc priest to Krieg, human wizard. Okay, so there's a conversation between a cleric and a magic user here, right? All right, so again, I said casting spells is roll to cast. Um, and you would roll, in this case for a wizard, it talks about specifically here at first that you would roll 1d20 plus your intelligence modifier, and it would be against a DC. Okay. The same for the priest, but it would be your wisdom modifier, and the DC to cast is 10 plus the spell's tier. Spells have a tier of 1 through 5 in this game. Okay. I'll get to that in a second. But if you make this casting roll and you succeed on your check, then the spell takes effect. That's it. Okay. If you fail on the check, it doesn't take effect. You can't cast that spell again until you complete a rest. Makes perfect sense. Okay. You failed to cast it. You messed something up, and now you're, let's say, now you're a little hesitant to cast it again because you didn't get it right, or you don't think you remembered it correctly, so you're fumbling over trying to figure it out. So you're going to have to rest and restudy it, and then have that aha moment. Oh yeah, right. I just think that's really cool. Critical success on a casting roll. If you roll a natural 20 on your check, you can double one of the spell's numerical effects. This remains in effect on a focus spell until your next focus check. Okay, so nat 20s still matter. They still mean something. I think that's really cool without overcomplicating it. Then you have a critical failure. If you roll a natural 1 on your spellcasting check, the spell doesn't take effect. If it was a focus spell, the spell ends immediately. And if the spell was a wizard spell, you can't cast that spell again until you successfully complete a rest, but you must also roll on the wizard mishap table corresponding to the spell's tier. This is DCC, just not as involved as the DCC mishap tables, but I really, really like this. If you're going to roll to cast, then you're also going to have the consequences of the critical failing of the roll to cast, or the benefits or the boons of being able to critically succeed when you roll the cast. And then that's wizards, and then priests. If the spell was a priest spell, your deity could be greatly displeased and revokes their power. You can't cast that spell again until you complete ritualistic penance to your deity and successfully complete a rest. Okay, so wizards have some really nasty stuff that can happen to you, and some not so nasty stuff that can happen on their mishap table. So rather than have a mishap table for a priest spell, it makes more sense that since the deity is giving you power, that the deity has a problem with you now, is displeased with you in some way, and requires something of you. Great questing opportunities here too, by the way. Great personal dilemma for role playing for your character. So here's the example of penance. The DM determines the exact nature of the penance that you must undertake based on your deity and your alignment. Penance requires a holy quest, ritualistic atonement, or a material sacrifice that you donate or destroy. Inadequate or subversive penance, such as donating your sacrifice to a party member, which I think is hilarious, only displeases your deity further and makes the spell loss permanent. Ouch. So your deity's watching. They know. They hear you. They see what you're doing. Okay. I just think that's really cool. You have a sacrifice value table here. Again, this is very similar to DCC. Just the costs are different, and the associated descriptions are much longer and more detailed for penance and how it works in Dungeon Crawl Classics. Okay. So you see the spell tier there from 1 through 5. Okay, then here's your wizard mishap tables, and they're based on spell tier. You can see these here, pretty substantial. There's a table for levels 3 through 4 and a table for level 5. Then you have scrolls and wands. If you use a scroll or a wand that contains magic spells, you can use them to cast these spells if it's on your spell list, even if you don't know the spell. That's cool. To do so, again, DC 10 spellcasting check plus the tier level of the spell contained in the wand or in the scroll. You're going to treat this the same as normal casting with the following additions. Okay. After a successful or failed casting attempt from a scroll, the magical writing disappears and it ceases to work. So if you want to learn the scroll, then even if you fail, the writing is gone because you've read it out, either out loud or in your mind. And so therefore the writing disappears. I think it makes it for a great consumable, and it's a risk. Okay. Just like as if you cast it, the writing disappears and the scroll crumbles to dust. I think it's cool to do it both ways like that. And then wand, on a failed casting attempt, it stops functioning until you complete a rest. Again, maybe you have to go back and re-examine how you use the wand. Maybe there's a little bit of a repair you have to do to the wand, and do a little bit more research or reading on it as to how you messed that up. It's a great role-playing opportunity there. And then on a critical failure, the wand actually breaks completely and permanently ceases to work, and the spellcaster incurs a mishap or penance as usual. So wands can be really super cool and also a little deadly, depending on if you crit fail. Spell attributes, of course, they have tiers 1 through 5, as I said. The descriptions have their ranges, and self means you. Duration, focus spells are spells with concentration, basically, that you can continue to carry on with a focused duration. And there's only one at a time that can be operating. Then you have overlapping effects. Overlapping or ongoing effects of the same spell on the same target do not combine. The spell with the most powerful effect takes precedence, such as the spell with the longer remaining duration. Then, of course, to maintain focus on those focus or concentration type spells, the spell remains in effect until the start of your next turn with your successful spell casting check. With a failed spell casting check, the spell ends. If you were focusing, you don't lose the ability to cast the spell. However, if you critically fail on a maintain focus check, you treat it as a standard crit fail. If you take damage or you become distracted, and I'm going to put that in quotes because distracted can be whatever your dungeon master and you at the table encounter and what you talk about as to what distraction is, right? Because this is rulings over rules. So your dungeon master at the table is going to make a ruling and say, hey, I think that's a distracting thing for you, so therefore make a check. Okay. If you take damage or you become distracted while you're focusing, you must immediately make the check to maintain the focus. Here's a list of your tier 1 spells. Your tier 1 through 5 spells for a priest. And then here's your start of your wizard spell list for tiers 1 and 2, 3, 4, and 5. Some spell descriptions here. I won't cover all of those, but you'll see pretty typical spells here that you would have in other old school games. And some of them are named exactly as you would see that they would be named in other systems. Okay, then you come to this really cool picture right here. Again, really grimdark, kind of gothic style, old school art. They're in a pretty bad predicament right there, and I just think that's really cool. You got the dwarf is just really ready to throw down with that cool looking axe. Okay, now we talk about gameplay. The Shadowdark is like a sleeping bear. Only go near if you have a 10-foot pole and are prepared to die. I really like that. The feel of that is just really cool. All right, so adventuring, crawlers, those who dare the lost halls and caverns of the Shadowdark are called by many names: crawlers, delvers, explorers, adventurers, treasure hunters. And this is the chapter where you're going to learn how to crawl. So the first step is understanding your environment and imagining an action you want to take. Okay, that's important for old school. It's really important. Maybe you do this in your 5th edition games. Maybe you don't, or whatever system you play. But that's really important. You're imagining the actions that you take and understanding your environment. Okay. And you're not simply scouring your character sheet for ideas and options. And she puts that as an exclamation point because that's incredibly important. It is in this RPG. It is in old school. You're not looking down at your sheet, scouring it to determine what your options are, and then asking to use an option, asking to push a button. Okay. Your crawling career depends on your ability to think outside the sheet. And on my channel, I've said that a couple of different times in some videos. I think that's incredibly important to play the game, to play the environment, to be immersed in character and not hovering over your character like it's just a little avatar on a video game screen, or it's just a character sheet that you're playing. Actually take the role. Imagine what you would really do if you were in your character's situation. Do you see a suit of armor in an alcove? Maybe you lift the helm's visor and make sure nothing is looking back at you. Do you hear faint voices behind a rotting wooden door? Maybe you creep up and press your ear against it to hear what's happening on the other side. Is a band of orcs chasing you and your companions down a hallway? Maybe tearing the decrepit tapestries from the walls will hamper their pursuit. None of the above ideas are listed on the character sheet, although you should use your stats, attributes, your spells, your gear, and your talents. Don't limit yourself only to those. I would reinforce that further by saying, don't rely on those when you're playing, as in that's how you think you play. No, play your character, describe. All this is as best you can, right? And as what works for your table, but describe your actions. Use your five sense understanding of the environment. Ask questions about that and probe with those senses and with those questions, and anything that you can think of to try. It doesn't have to be on your sheet, because otherwise, if it's just on your sheet, what an incredible amount of limitation you've placed on yourself, and what a very, very tight box you've placed yourself in at the table, and when there's so much more possible than that. Okay. Then, of course, those of you who are familiar with 5th edition and other systems that might call it different things, this system has advantage and disadvantage, so you know how that works. And if you have both advantage and disadvantage on a roll, they cancel each other out. Nat 20 is, of course, a natural 20 on the dice. It's your maximum success or capacity, and the attack automatically hits and is a critical hit. And damage, we'll get to here in a minute, is adjusted based on that critical hit. And on a 20, a nat 20 on the die, that falls or fails to be your maximum capacity, and it automatically misses, and you could possibly strike an ally. And then if there's a random chance for an outcome, now here's the cool little, just if the DM doesn't exactly know on a split second how that might be ruled, or whatever, they can just, he or she can say, hey, you know what? I'll tell you what, here's the thing. You dropped your torch, it might go out. A 1, 2, 3 on a D6, it goes out. 4, 5, 6, it doesn't. That's it. And by the way, that's how we do nat 20 roll, or natural 1 rolls in this game as well. You have an ally right near you, you're swinging your big old broadsword, and you roll a nat 1 on the goblin you're trying to hack in front of you. The possibility exists at that moment that 1, 2, 3, you hit your ally. 4, 5, 6, you miss. Or 1, 2, 3, you bang off your ally's shield and drop your sword at your feet. 4, 5, 6, you don't. There's a bunch of cool ways that just really, really easy decider here on a D6. It's just quick, easy, down and dirty, move on. Okay. Now there's another thing that's in this system, which I kind of like too. In DCC, you have an actual luck stat where you can do some luck things. I know in Pathfinder 2nd edition, there's a hero points. And I don't know what there are in other systems, maybe some bennies or something like that. I don't remember the other systems. I don't have a whole lot of the other types. But this has got luck tokens. Okay, so you can award a luck token for exceptional roleplay or heroism or just plain coolness. But you can only have one luck token, sorry. You can only have one luck token at a time. You can cash in the luck token to re-roll any roll you just made, but you must use the new result. You can also give your luck token to a companion. So this is just a really cool mechanic that, like, hey, I messed up that roll, man. I'm gonna use my luck right now. I might get lucky and, do better. Or you might not, right? Or your companions really, like, they need to rely on luck now to survive. So here you go, man, and then give them your luck token, right? I think that's really cool. If you go on Drive-Thru RPG here in a couple of days, I think, hopefully my Gnome ancestry will be up there on my Retro DM Ray publications, and they have a feature of that ancestry, that race, that ties into this. So you might want to check that out. Anyway, all right. So, how many do you give as a dungeon master? 3 to 5 per player during an entire session with a pulpy heroic feel. But you might only give out 1 per player during a game session if it's grim, difficult, and dark. So this is a number that you're going to kind of play with in your game. You're going to experiment and see what works for you and your players and your table and the type of story that you're trying to or the type of game that you're trying to run that the story comes out of or emerges out of. Okay. And if you're giving multiple ones, of course, that would mean only that the character already spent one and has a slot now to fill with 1 more luck token. Okay. Um, those are kind of neat. And then this is just an idea of how you could use your stats or use your attributes. And so these are like making attribute rolls, or things that you would do with your attribute. This is pretty typical for most old school games, and you can vary this as much as you want. What is strength used for, or dex, or con, or intelligence, or wisdom, or charisma? Okay. And when to roll. Um, Usually you succeed at what you're trained to do without ever needing to roll a check. Okay. That was very important in old school. Way back in advanced first edition D&D, and there wasn't even any skills of any kind in the game. And you might have a secondary skill, maybe 2 if you were really, really good at rolling percentile dice, but you left off those skills to go and seek a life of adventure. Okay. So those are not things that you would typically go back to, but you might have some knowledge left over from those former days before your adventuring career began. Okay. So when you wanted to do something, you and the dungeon master negotiated what you were going to do. And if they thought, or he or she thought that you could do that, then you could do that. And if they didn't, they didn't. Um, the game wasn't really skill based. Okay. And this one isn't either. There are no skills. Okay. There are things that you can do, that you could say that I'm skillful at, from my background that you roll or pick, but there are no skills. I think that's really important for this type of gameplay. If you're a skill-based game system player, that's cool. That's no problem. 5th edition is that. Other games are even more heavily that. That's cool. That's fine too. But this one's just not that. Okay. So, for example, a wizard is always ready or always able to read magical runes, and a thief always finds a trap if searching in the right area. Okay? If you take the time to scan the sky for threats or examine a stretch of wall for a secret door, you simply succeed. So it's all about describing. So I'm gonna scan the entire sky and see if I see something flying around. Well, that makes sense. But I'm in a 40 by 40 room of stone walls that are rough, patchy, and flaking, and I'm gonna check every wall in the room. Well, okay. If you're a lone player, no problem, but that's going to take a while. Are you checking it for what? Well, I want to look for anything that is out of the ordinary, out of place. Does my torch flicker or move when I hold it around the walls in various locations? I'm going to push and pull and move on the various different projections and rub around on the spots of flake and all those kinds of things. I'm looking for those types of things as I make a detailed observation of the walls in the room. Okay, great description. Pick a wall because you're not alone. Let the other players at the party have some of the spotlight to look for walls and look on the walls and look for these things. And then the dungeon master already knows which wall it's on if there is one. And then the person who chooses that and gives a decent description gets to find it. That's it. Social encounters rely on charisma, on what you say rather than your charisma check. So it's all about interaction. If you want to know what you think the person really means underneath what they said, well, then do you as a player get those hints and know that during the game? You don't roll a check for that. Okay. This is you're playing a role. You're not playing the role of the dice and playing the sheet. So it's different. Okay. The DM only asks for a check when the following is true. If the action has a negative consequence, and that's in bold for failure. So it has to really have a negative consequence, not like oh, I messed up and hurt their feelings, or oh, I messed up and said the wrong thing and now they don't want to talk to us anymore. No, it has to have a good negative consequence. If I messed up and they don't want to talk anymore, therefore they call the guards. Okay, that's a negative consequence for that failure, probably, or maybe, and so you need to roll. Okay, does the action require a skill? Again, in bold, I think it's bold because there are no skills. It means, does the action require a certain level of skill to do that? Do you have that tied to your background? Would that make sense for your character? Kind of know that? Cool. So therefore, is it difficult and have a negative consequence associated with that? Then roll. Is there a time pressure extreme upon that? Then roll. So then you have difficulty classes. They're slightly different than 5th edition. Over here, you have the easy as 9, normal 12, hard 15, and extreme 18. And it gives you some really quick, down and dirty explanation there of what those DCs might generally contain. Okay. Again, manipulate this however you see fit for your game. Then you have opposed checks. So if multiple creatures are working against each other, then an opposed check is what decides who succeeds. Each participant would roll the relevant attribute check at the same time, even if it's not their turn, and the highest result wins. You re-roll ties. Really simple. Okay. So if you're arm wrestling, for example, both of you are going to roll strength, and doesn't matter if it's your turn or not, you're going to roll strength, then the highest result wins. Okay, here's the coolest part for me of Shadowdark RPG, or at least one of the top 2, which is real time. Time passes in the game world at the same pace as it passes in the real world. So 1 minute or hour of game time is equal to 1 minute or hour in real time. This matters for tracking light sources because most light sources only last for 1 hour of real time. If you can't track real time in your game, assume 1 hour is equal to 10 rounds. Okay? So that should give you an idea of how to do rounds versus the real time. She uses little egg timers because they don't have phones at the table. That prevents that, or tablets, or all those things. And there's no buzzing. There's no checking your device. That kind of a thing. The little plastic cheap, like a dollar store or Family Dollar type of little egg timers would work great. But however you want to do it at your table. But I think this real-time mechanic is really cool because it lends an incredibly old school feel to the game without having these big timesheet trackers that the dungeon master has to check off all the time, or the dungeon master and the players have to keep checking these boxes every so often and taking them out of immersion to look at another sheet. I think this kind of cuts that out of there, and I think it's really, really cool. Then you have an explanation of turns and rounds. A turn is a player's moment to describe what their character does. Players act one by one on each of their turns. Some turns need a bit of room to breathe. A character is speaking with someone can make a few reasonable exchanges back and forth. And a round completes when each person has taken one turn. Okay, so one turn means all the way around the table. Okay, the same as one round does. Okay, but they're interchangeable in the sense that it's both all those things around the table, but the turn is just it's a bit longer explanatory or stretched out period of time as opposed to a round. But you don't need finite definitions of minutes versus seconds and all those kinds of things, because again, this is not about that. Okay. Every moment of the game doesn't have to be accounted for in real time. If the characters want to spend 10 minutes examining a room from top to bottom, GM and players can agree that time passes. Okay. And when time passes, the DM and players move any timers down by that amount. Okay. You could hand wave that and just let them look around the room. You don't find anything. You spend about 10 minutes or so and find nothing and move on. Maybe you want to do that. Maybe you don't. Depends on how you want to run the game, right? Effects with a duration of rounds do expire. The DM rolls one random encounter check that occurs on a 1 through 3 on a d6 while this time is passing. Okay, so this is minutes pass. Hours and days pass. Effects with a duration shorter than the time passed expire. The GM uses overland travel rules to check for encounters that occur while time is passing, and this is in hours and days. After resolving the encounters, the game world fast forwards to the new point in time. Okay, then you have turn order. Initiative is a d20 plus dex, just like you're used to in 5th edition. But this time, the person who rolled the highest takes the first turn, and then the turn order moves clockwise from that individual around the table. Okay, so highest wins the start of that initiative, and then it moves onward from there. And then it's group initiative in that regard at that point forward, and it stays that way going forward until that scene, that encounter, or whatever's over, and then you'll do it again later. So you'll do any countdown timers for spells and effects. Then you'll take your action and you'll move up to near, which you can split up any way you want. Move near again if you're skipping an action, so that's a double move. And then the DM will describe what happens as a result on your turn. And then the DM's turn, they're going to count down any timers not tracked by the players. They're going to check for random encounters. They're going to take actions and make movements for any creatures or environmental effects. And then describe what the characters notice as a result of the first 3 steps. Okay. And then we move on to encounters. An encounter occurs when a challenge presents itself that stops the character's progress. An encounter could include a monster charging out of the darkness, a sinkhole breaking open in the ground, or a town guard halting the characters. The DM rolls for the chance of an encounter every few rounds, depending on how dangerous the character's environment is. Okay, so we have the Shadowdark is any place where darkness, danger, and myth reign supreme. It could be crumbling ruins, ancient mountain strongholds, or mysterious towers. It could be in gloomy forests, trap-laden pyramids, or haunted sea caves. As long as the characters are going into danger with swords, spells, and torches ready, they're going into the Shadowdark. Characters are in crawling rounds, that's in bold, while not in combat. In other words, you're exploring, you're talking, you're engaging with the environment. Okay, then you have vision in this system. All characters need light to see. That is awesome, because what an incredible amount of mystery this game is now when no one can see in the dark, right? When no one can even make out heat forms, which is old school infravision, right? Or ultravision for drow, right? Those don't exist in this game. Torches are important, lanterns are important. Okay, so many times in old school games it's basically just you hand wave that and you move on, and I think you lose some of the mystery, some of the crawling fear and anxiety and fun of having light be a thing, just like having food and water be a thing, because it takes a while before a cleric gets create food and water, so it must be important, right? Or purify food and water, it must be important to get rid of spoilage and get rid of problems with the food. If those spells weren't there, then it wouldn't be a big deal. Okay. But this vision issue is not true for darkness adapted beings of the Shadowdark. Note that any area outside of a light source's illumination is in total darkness. Okay. So light source area, everything else is dark. Most light sources last for up to an hour of real time and illuminate a limited area. Players have 2 options when lighting more than 1 light source at a time. The newer light source rides along on the current timer, or 2, you extinguish all the old light sources and start a new timer with the fresh one. The DM can make rulings counter to the above. The purpose is to make tracking light timers simple and not frustrating. And then while in total darkness, a creature who is not darkness adapted has disadvantage on tasks it undertakes that requires sight. And also the environment becomes deadly, and that's in bold, because there are environment levels as an antagonist in the game as well. The DM checks for a random encounter every crawling round. All right, so I think I'm going to stop there for right now, and we'll move beyond this in further into this crawling section and beyond in the next one. This is part 2 of the Shadowdark RPG coverage. Again, thanks, Kelsey, for allowing me to do this, and for all of you who are tuning in, subbing, sharing, and giving me thumbs up. I really, really appreciate that, and putting lots of good comments, giving me lots of things that are food for thought. I really appreciate that, and again, thank you guys so much for tuning into the channel and following along. If you have any thing that you want to put in the comments, I'd love to read those and respond to those as best that I can. Again, it's full family friendly and G-rated, so any stuff in there that isn't that, I'll just delete that, and we'll move on from there. Again, as I always say, take care, God bless, prosper, and good gaming. Later.